Okay, great. So, hi everybody. Just a quick question. Who is not fine with English or not so safe? Okay, great. So everybody is understanding me. Great.
Those probably don't understand the question.
Yeah, probably. Maybe you want to ask and check. Okay, great. Yeah. So my name is Christopher. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at ReadyToOrder. Just give you a short introduction what we're doing. We're a web and cloud-based POS solution for catering, retail, and service. We are focusing in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. We started to develop back in 2012. Founded our limited in 2015 at 25 customers. We grew pretty quickly over the past three years due to a change of law in Austria, similar to the one in Czech, where a lot of companies are forced to use a POS system. So we had just the right product at the right place already on the market. Currently we are having more than 60 employees and more than 7,000 customers in that regions. And for the future we are want to be the all-in-one solution for small and medium businesses, which they use to operate the business in an optimal way. Basically we have a lot of features, just to name a few of them. In the last couple of years we've pushed a lot of features into the software, which made the code be not that maintainable for everybody else except me, which is pretty bad because the company grew and the customers grew, but the code was maintained by one guy. So, and wasn't that cool to have that setup. So let's dive into it and check out the good parts first. Most of the code was covered by, or the most important parts of the code are covered by unit tests and integration tests, and partly end-to-end tests. We had Composer in place, we had Amazon Web Services already for our infrastructure, and luckily we used Eloquent. But that was also a pain in the ass, but you will find out later. But we didn't have a framework in place. So, and at some point, these things just got overhand, so it was like many thousand lines of code. We mixed different logics, responsibilities. We had a bad folder structure with no single point of entry, interdependencies, code duplication everywhere. We really overused Eloquent models from the Laravel framework, especially the events. So we called other models from the event hooks, and there we called another model, and in the end it was just impossible to follow. Then you have this is dirty check everywhere to only do something if some certain field changed and so on, and you really get into hell in there. I thought it's the magic bullet or the golden bullet, but it was not. So I had to learn it the hard way. In the end it was just impossible for new developers to onboard, and something had to change. This is just, I don't know if you see something. It's basically we're building it like it's 99, like JavaScript, PHP code generating JavaScript code. If it would have been possible, I think we would have tried to generate PHP code from JavaScript code. So it's for example, our app contains of some sub-apps. There is a POS part, which is mobile first. There is an administration part, which is for administering your business with statistics, importing and exporting and so on. And those apps, would be the POS and this is the administration, and both have the same folder structure, only direct access to PHP files, including requiring everywhere having one big file which just does all the magic, which grew over the years to like 6,000-7,000 lines of code. And if you didn't know where to put something, you just put it there because so not that smart. So and for developers, it basically felt like that. So everybody who took a closer look at the code was feeling like, what the fuck is going wrong here? So something had to change because we had to also scale well in the development department. So we had the good question: what shall we do? Should we do everything new from scratch, or shall we do refactoring? Basically we had no clue what we do. We switched between let's do a rewrite because it's impossible to do a refactoring, then we switched back to refactoring, then we tried some dependency injection framework, so we tried various things, and in the end we just said, okay, why shall we do it all on our own again, and let's just try to do a prototype in Laravel and just let's look how it feels. And we decided for the refactoring. Basically, the refactoring, as most of you know, has some advantages. Like you can go live fast. You already have some business logic in place. You can change just step by step. But the thing is, you can't remove bad patterns. It's not easy to move to a framework at all. And it requires a lot of code insights, so you can't just tell some random guy, hey, just refactor that code. He probably drops out 50% of the if statements, which he says, not needed anyway. So, and most of the time, if you spend 3 to 5 years working on a code base, iterating it over and over again, most of the if statements have their right to exist there. So what we did is we set Laravel more or less, we used Laravel and put our legacy code just somewhere into some spot. Okay? So what we did is some step-by-step things to get that working. Basically, most of the legacy projects are not namespaced, so you just have files, you don't have a proper folder structure. Your assets are mostly built, if you're a one-man show, you just have a file watcher in PHP Storm or so, and just build the minified files from there. You have a lot of global states with global itself, with so the global keyword you can use in functions to bring some variable in. You have bash scripts, you have no proper queuing system, no proper config system and other things. But basically the most important thing is, which I left out now, is that fallback proxy controller. So when I said we put all the legacy files somewhere, we put it somewhere where the legacy proxy controller could find it. So every route which was not registered on the router of Laravel fall back in a catch-all handler, which was the fallback proxy controller, which tried to look up a file at a certain directory. We put that content into an output buffer, made sure that we return a proper Laravel response object again to fulfill the Laravel request cycle, and we're back, or we had an up and running setup within 4 weeks. By 2 people doing 100 hours per week. So we really punched it in. We wanted to get something live really soon. And in the end, we had Laravel framework with the same legacy code as before. We just had the possibility to extract file by file, route by route, step by step. So this was pretty cool because we didn't have any hurry by now. We could deliver code still in the legacy manner or in a new proper way. So that's basically the router and controller part, which is rather simple still. So I think I took some things off from here. So we had a fast way into production, which was the most important thing. And we use now a well-known framework with a lot of libraries and possibilities to extend and exchange things. So Laravel and its dependency injection container really gives you a lot of flexibility. So let's check out the status quo. So most of our business logic, this 200,000 lines of code, is refactored. We use the full power of Laravel, so we can just use everything. We're pretty happy with that. And I just want to give you an introduction in how we manage to organize our code, because that's something we iterated over and over again and struggled, and just the most difficult thing as a developer is naming where to put something and off by one issues. And most of these things, the 2 things I think we solved for us pretty cool. So I want to give you an overview of our structure, which is probably, you probably have something similar, but still I want to show you how we solved it. So on top of everything is the router. You register your routes, you have authentication there, everything clear. You have your controller, and the controller has some responsibilities. It has the responsibility to do a business logic domain mapping. So from the request domain to the business logic domain. It does some route-specific authorization checks, and it calls the business logic through a proxy domain service which is called session XYZ, which stands for the domain service, or directly returns a blade view which returns HTML content. We still are not a pure backend. We still somehow need to return some HTML pages because still not done yet. The session domain service, in that case the user service, performs the business logic specific authentication checks. So in that layer we have the possibility to ask the session, are we allowed to do that? Because we know which user it is, which account it is, and we have all that information. If we are allowed to do that, and we maybe need additional data from the session, we're calling the underlying service, which is the user service, which actually holds the business logic. So you still have the possibility to just execute the business logic, or if you go through the controller, you have to go through a so-called session user service, session domain service, because then we can make sure that nobody can execute business logic who is not allowed to do so. The repository under the user service, I think it's pretty clear, is basically the layer to our database. Okay, so we are using models to communicate with our and the query builder to execute queries and to store data. What we are doing here is, and I think I'm mentioning it later, or you find it on a slide later as well, is we're doing a lot of code generation because we have around 200 models in our application, and some tables are just quite big, so you have like 200 columns or so. So it's a big pain to write getters and setters and having everything written by hand. So we did code generation for our models, meaning we are generating an abstract model which has all the getters, all the setters, all the field names as constants, and some more necessary information. For example, also if you're dealing with a JSON object in the database, you're getting back a string in PHP. What shall I do with a string? So the getter returns me a typed JSON object which I can easily manipulate or access data in there, for example. So we're trying to make the developer experience really smooth for that. We're doing the same with the repository. So we're generating methods like create without fetch, update, find or fail, and all those things. And you can really just make it concrete and extend the abstract. All the methods you need are already in place and there. So it's really neat to bring in new code. So creating a user. Okay, this is from compressing the images. Basically, we have those three sub-apps: our administration, POS is the mobile first view, and our public API. So we're offering our third-party apps to integrate with our application, and therefore we have a public API. And I'd like to show you now how it looks in practice, just for some better understanding. So back then, endpoints to create a user looked like this. So this was a micro REST framework with router, and you just had a closure and you put something in. There was hardly validation. There was no use of setters. Ugly code. So what it looks like now, we have our router. Everybody's familiar with a router. You're putting your routes there. You're having a controller, and you're having a method which is responsible for handling the request and returning the response. On the controller level, we have a method create, and here we see that we are type hinting a create user mutation request. So Laravel gives you the possibility to automatically inject the request object which holds all the necessary data. Normally you just type hint the request object there, but it gives you also the possibility to extend the default request object and put some logic on that for validation, for example. So that's what the create user mutation request is doing for us. We will see it in a second. The second thing is it's calling the Getmap object, which is returning a filled model, which we can just simply pass to the session user service, which checks if the user is authenticated to do so, and in the end we're returning a mapped user response. Why do we do that? Because you know that models have public property names and private property names, and you don't want to expose the private ones to the public ones, and therefore you have to do some mapping from request to domain and from domain to response. It might also be different though. So, and the create user mutation request looks like that. So basically the getMapped object just fetches all those parameters which are defined in constants, and the constants have some prefixes. There might be a body param, there might be a route param, there might be a query param, thanks. And just keep that in mind, getting important later. And we can define some required fields here. So, and in the end, we can just call one method on in the controller on the request, which gives us the mapped object, and we are totally happy. The session user service is straightforward. It just gets the account ID from the current session and sets it on the user. So there is no way that we accidentally store some user to an account which we are not authenticated to. So, and the cool thing is why we invented, or why we need, no, not invented, why we needed that is because we have those three different apps, the POS, the administration, and the public API, which all have different authentication mechanisms, all different controllers, but at some point we needed some unification layer, and that's why we have that session domain service, which can deal with any type of session interface, where the session interface gets implemented by the corresponding sub app session. So great. So there is some error here. Okay, the user service is straightforward as well. So we're just validating the data which is set on the user. So before, if you remember, we had that request validation where we make sure that the data we got on the request is sane. And now we're doing another sanity check on the user model itself. And then we're creating it over the repository. The repository, this is the auto-generated one. So we don't need to create that. We just call the create method on the concrete, which extends that abstract. So also quite straightforward. The model itself looks like that. So the validate method on the user model validates by these rules, okay? So we are having the columns, we are having our validation helper, which gives us all the validation rules, and the abstract user is the auto-generated one. So you see we're having here all the fields, we're having getters and setters, getting typed arguments and typed return types. Okay, whoever did a public API for somebody else? Who had to write the documentation for that? Whose documentation is still up to date? How do you do that? API.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is just the tool, so you do it manually. Some other hand, how do you do it?
Annotations.
Annotations, okay, so how do you do it?
Video. Epidocs,
Okay, so you write the annotations, and based on the annotations you document, or you're generating some probably OpenAPI spec or so, and then you're using that, right? Or probably.
Yes.
Okay. As you now know, we also have this public API, and our API documentation was not up to date. And we wanted to have a solution to not get into the same situation again, where we now updated it and then it's drifting apart. Basically, you have two approaches. Either you have a spec, and based on the spec you write the code, and you have to comply on the spec. If somebody messes up in the code with a typo or so, the spec is invalid, and you're sitting there as a developer and being annoyed why the API is not working. So we agreed on the solution that we want to auto-generated based on our code. So this generates to that, and this gets rendered by an open API spec. So this is not just we just take the routes and print it here, and everything is hidden or not there. We're really having every possible request, response, and everything auto-generated based on these typed objects from request and response. And to just give you a list how we basically do that. We're using a library which is called Swagger PHP. So you can use PHP annotations to define how you get request or get response looks like, what request parameters you can have, and so on. But still, you don't have a proper IDE plugin for PHP Storm to have go to definition or proper intentions and auto formatting for that. So it's a really pain to do that manually. So what we're doing right now is we're parsing the routes. We're collecting all the controller data, checking possible methods, return types, and request classes. We're using reflection classes to understand the request and the response classes, collecting validation rules, collecting casting rules, checking for annotations on the properties. For example, with an add example or add description, I can override the default behavior of the auto generator, which checks, for example, if you give him a validation rule email, it can automatically fill it with a faked email, for example. With strings, it can also be read from the properties, for example. But with descriptions, you might want to give it an own one. Then we're basically creating a big array from that and generating an SVG file, or SWG, which I somewhere have prepared, which looks like that basically. Sorry, you don't see that. That's too bad. So we're generating a file for that. This is suggested to be actually in the controller. So if you want to use the library, they suggest you to put that on the controller, put that on the model, put that on the properties, put that on that object, and so on. So you're putting your documentation all across your application. And even on your models, which are not necessarily meant to be used by the public API, because you have a bigger application. So it doesn't make any sense. So that's why we're generating this file separately, and just let the library do the work on that. And this is generating a JSON file, which looks like that, which gives you all those information, which conforms to the OpenAPI spec. And this can be just uploaded to Swagger or whatever viewer you want to use. So basically our API documentation for now is writing itself, which is quite cool. So even if there is a typo or so, isn't that bad, because the OpenAPI the API works with that typo. So if you want to fix that, we have to release a new version for that. Okay, so yeah, what else is going on our side? We're doing currently GraphQL and React implementation for our front end, which we're in fact rewriting, because the front end is really something which is more or less standalone and needs to be decoupled from the monolithic application how it's now. So it makes sense to do it like that. As you already know, we are doing a lot of code generation also for GraphQL types. I don't know if there are some people who have experience with GraphQL and using it on PHP. Yeah, it's quite a pain to write. It's horrible. Yeah. It's horrible because you have to write a lot of PHP classes.
Again and again.
Yeah, for those we have a cool solution. If you're interested, I can show you. So you're just writing a definition, and all the PHP files get generated by itself. So you just need to do a simple GraphQL file, and all the magic happens, which is pretty cool as well. Yeah, we're doing a lot of stuff on the CI for code quality with linting, static code analysis. Yeah, we have that Swagger already in place. yeah, and some other things. We're using currently Docker Compose because we want to migrate our infrastructure to Kubernetes soon. So also quite exciting topic. Yeah, in summer we killed the beast, which was the max number here is not accurate. It was like 6,800 lines. It was the class which was almost used in every file. It was completely crazy. So it was a really hard work to get there. So quite cool for us as a team. Yeah, for us as a team, we're currently focusing on scaling the infrastructure. We want to cluster our customers, implement sharding, and have a really flexible infrastructure to just spin up as many nodes or whatever we want. So because we're having a big opportunity with Germany, as there is a similar change in law too, and some other European countries as well. So there is a cool window of opportunity we probably not get again soon. So we are really focusing on that right now, and yeah, other topics like you see here as well. Yeah, things we basically learned. So think, prototype, discuss, repeat. It's if you don't have a prototype, you can't say if it's working or not if you haven't tried it yet. So then, and also requests are mostly doomed to fail, as a lot of knowledge gets lost. So even how hard you try or how hard you try to document things, you lose a lot of knowledge because a lot of code just documents itself, and you just lose a lot of knowledge there. Yeah, and in the end, a refactoring should actually result in a rewrite. So in the end, you should end in the same stage, but the refactoring is definitely the saner way to go there, because you're not having a feature freeze for 5 years or needing 200 Indian people who are just doing something in 2 weeks which you did in 5 years and missing 50% of the things. Clean up the project first and then separate business logic. So really make everything straight, get your homework done, and then you can separate business logic. Some interesting things here. So if somebody's working with Laravel and you don't know it, I haven't known it for a long time, is the IDE helper, which gives you a lot of auto-completion for Laravel facades and so on. Facades are, by the way, and the aliases are a pain in the ass, so if you use it anyway, it's not that good. PHP stand probably is everybody knows that. Code sniffer, PHP debug for code coverage, as it's a lot faster than Xdebug. Paratest for running parallel unit tests, especially if you have thousands of tests. Yeah, especially integration tests which are database intense. It's quite cool to use that. Swagger PHP for the documentation. We're still looking for backend developers also on our side. We have one Czech developer who recommended us basically here. So because he said the Czech guys are cool people, and we just wanted to get to know each other. So yeah, basically that's why we're here. So I think in the end, I guess I'm finished. So thanks for Yeah, I think I was quick, but are there any questions or things you would like to ask? Just switching to here. You mentioned GraphQL tool you're using. We're using a GraphQL library to just checking. What's the name of this? I think this is the folklore. Yeah, this is the library we're using. But still, this just gives you the tooling for that. Still, you have to write a lot of manual classes and resolvers and all the thing. So what we did is, and what I mentioned before is, we're having a specs folder for GraphQL. And for example, we have here, let's take a look at Cashbook, and we can define all the types and all queries and input data, all we need, and it automatically generates all the classes for us, resolvers to the correct resolver. You can use directives for deprecation messages. You can, it saves you a lot of work. So we estimated that what takes you 2 hours takes you with that 5 minutes. So it's really, really a big helper, and we're actually want to open source that, but it would need us a little cleanup, as I think it's 1 or 2 files with like 3,000 lines of code, which was a night session of a colleague back then who was just annoyed by writing all those PHP files by hand. So yeah.
So this generates mutations also?
It generates everything for you, yeah. You can just define everything in here.
So the directives are yours, custom?
Sorry?
The resolve directives?
Yeah, these are custom directives, yeah. So we're passing everything with how is it called? I think it's also NetTool to pass all that PHP code to, I think it's with an AST tree, with abstract syntax tree. So we're passing everything to get down there and also understand everything properly. Yeah. Anything else? Everything good? Yeah.
I noticed that you are using constants for the validation. What's the purpose for this?
Yeah, on the ones that have auto-completion, so you don't have to remember all the rules which are there
You have to remember the constants.
Yeah, but it's in a class validation helper, and the validation helper has all that constants in here. Because the thing is, I once got the advice: if you use a string twice, make a constant. On the one side, you don't have a compiler here, but if you have a compiled language, you have a compiler which tells you there's a typo, and you can find usages easily, because if you just make a text search all, you find and you look for required, you don't find everything. But if you go here and go for after, we don't find anything, but for required, and you command P, you find all the rules there. So it's just having more magic basically as well.
It makes sense.
In the roads definition, you had a Laravel helper or something like that?
Yes, exactly.
What does it do?
The Laravel helper, basically, we wanted to use the class definition here. So the thing is, the regular usage for a resolver is controller add method.
Yeah.
But the refactoring and moving of classes doesn't work for that. So you always have to manually check and go there. There is a Laravel plugin for PHP which can do that, but I'm not sure if it's working really well.
I have that installed and it works. Yeah, it works.
Yeah. Maybe I have to check it out again, but I don't think it's working with renaming methods, or is it?
Well, I didn't try that. I know I moved.
No, it doesn't.
That's the thing, yeah. So, and I think I didn't know that back then, so we just made a helper to use the class, and basically all of us, what this is doing is, it's really straightforward.
Yeah, sure.
So, no magic there. It's just to have refactoring, because we moved a lot of files a lot of times.
Thanks.
Will you upload this presentation somewhere?
If you tell me where I shall upload it, I can do so, yeah. I can, maybe I send you the link for the presentation, so it can be shared.
Budeme určitě dávat záznam a to budou.
Yeah, if no questions are left, thanks for the attention, and great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.